All right, sorry about that, lady. We had a strange technical issue. It's very weird. It hasn't happened like that I recall. Everything looked fine on my end. Everything looked completely normal, but you guys were saying that, it froze. So we're back. This is kind of like a part two, and continuation. We'll kind of get a double feature today. But let's go back to what I was waxing eloquently just before everything kind of went haywire. We do have stormy weather around here today, so could be interfering, so what have you. But I think I left off where I was talking about the fact that everybody in Abraham's house was all the men, of course, were circumcised. There were no Noahides in Abraham's house because everybody was a part of the covenant. Okay. So it says here, he that is born in your household of purchased money shall surely be circumcised. Thus my covenant shall be. Again, we're up to the fifth time now. My covenant, singular, my covenant. Thus my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. Wow. HaShem wants to basically, I know tattoo is not the right word, but for lack of a better word, he wants to tattoo the covenant on your flesh, if you will. Okay. Interestingly, tattoos are forbidden. We've covered this before. If you happen to have a tattoo, you regret it. Listen, there's nothing you can do about it. Just don't get another one. Okay. But so we'll put that aside. But isn't it interesting that tattoos are forbidden? And the only mark you're supposed to have, and so is cutting yourself, by the way. But the only mark you're supposed to have in your flesh is the cut, if you will, the mark of circumcision. And by the way, notice what God says here. Let me read this again, because I just got through reading to you what the heretic wrote about. Well, if you're not circumcised but you're keeping the commandments, won't you condemn those who have the commandments? But blah blah. What? I mean, do you understand? The premise of that statement is so crazy. Okay. If you're not circumcised, you're not keeping the commandments. So anyway, it says here, thus my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. Okay. An uncircumcised male, the flesh of whose foreskin shall not be circumcised. Listen, I started this program out by saying that if you're not ritually circumcised, you're not saved. And some people, they're like, what? How dare you, Rabbi, make that judgment call? Well, it's not my judgment call. It's actually God's. I think right before we lost connection here, I was talking about this gentleman who was saying something online. I forget what the topic was. And I refuted him with about a half a dozen scripture verses. And the person came back and says, what are you trying to refute? And I said, frankly, I'm not trying to refute anything. It's God who is refuting what you're saying. Your argument is not with me. Your argument is with God. Look, because you're saying X, God is saying Y, and it's not me. I didn't write it. You see what I'm saying? So when I said you're not saved if you're not ritually circumcised, a lot of people would be like, whoa, that's radical. Is it? Listen to verse 14. Genesis 17:14. An uncircumcised male, the flesh of whose foreskin shall not be circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from its people. He has invalidated my covenant. That's what are we up to? 6? Am I counting right? That's the 6th time that he said my covenant in the singular. Therefore, if you have purposely, willingly, and knowingly not gotten ritually circumcised, then you have knowingly, willingly, and purposely invalidated the covenant, God's covenant. It's just that simple. That's why I said what I said based on this verse. If you've not gotten ritually circumcised, then you're not saved according to God. Now, of course, a man comes along and says, well, if you're not circumcised, you're and yet you're obeying the commandments. You're putting to shame those who have the commandments, blah, 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 blah. What? If you're not circumcised, you're A, not obeying the commandments, and B, not in the covenant, according to God. Will there be people who disagree with me, disagree with this teaching I'm doing right now, even though it's plain as day? Yes, of course there will be. Ooh, that happens all the time. But there are other people who are rational thinkers and understand that everything I've just said in the first segment and now in this new segment is completely logical, makes perfect sense, and is like, duh. I mean, a fifth grader gets this. This is not, you don't have to go get a PhD to break this down. And again, what's the big deal? It's like people that there are people right now who have not and presently will not go through conversion with Lapid Judaism or anybody else, any other legit Jewish organization, because they don't want to separate meat and dairy. That just blows my mind. Oh, yeah, they don't mind not eating pork and not eating shrimp and not eating catfish. But, man, they got to have cheese on their taco. I mean, that to me is like, I just have to say, I respect people, I understand. But I just have to tell you, man, if that's your shtick, and if you're one of those people that's like, I'd go through conversion, but I'm not sure I can give up my fettuccine Alfredo with chicken. I don't know how to tell you this, but you need to get a life. I mean, if your whole deal about rejecting the covenant comes down to a menu item, whoa, I'm not even kidding you right now. And you say, well, meat and dairy is really special to me. Son, I changed my entire menu when I became a Jew. I'm not talking about one menu item. I had my entire menu changed. Okay. So I don't want to hear it. But I think that's just, frankly, wow. But listen, there are people, what's the big deal? There's people who won't enter the covenant because they don't want to get circumcised. What? Or go through Hatafat and Dam Brit. What? It's just amazing to me what my minuscule little issue will keep people out of the covenant. Why don't you want to do that? Can you name for me one biblical hero, just one, who wasn't circumcised? Anybody we admire? Anybody? The answer, of course, is zero. So let me get this straight. You want to sit at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Moses, Joseph, Daniel, King David, King Solomon, all the apostles, Mordecai, all the prophets, Jehoshaphat, Hezekiah. You want to sit down with every single one of them, and you want to be the only uncircumcised man at the table. You know who else was uncircumcised? Goliath. Caesar, Pharaoh, Antiochus Epiphanes, Pontius Pilate. So whose team are you want to be on? Team circumcision or team uncircumcision? Who else was uncircumcised? The Philistines, the Midianites, the Persians, Haman, Potiphar. I mean, really. We talk about this stuff and people don't sit down and have just a common sense conversation. We just had an election in America and the vast majority of Americans, chose common sense. Just common sense. Men should not be allowed to box women in a boxing ring in women's sports. That's just common sense. And by the way, what the polls showed is that the vast majority of men thought that was wrong. And as men, we know that's inherently wrong. Do you want to be the only person sitting at the table at the Last Supper, if you not the Last Supper, but the wedding supper of the Lamb, if you will, or inside the you think you're going to be in the sukkah of Leviathan, sitting with every single man in that sukkah that is a biblical hero is circumcised, and you think you're going to be the uncircumcised dude sitting there. King David fought Goliath, and King David said, "Who's going to fight this uncircumcised Gentile?" You know why King David referred to him as King Uncircumcised Gentile? Because King David knew that circumcision was the covenant. And what he's saying is that I'm going to win this fight because I'm in covenant. He's not. That's the difference maker. So King David identified circumcision with being in the covenant. You know why he said that? Because of what I just read to you. So who wants to be the uncircumcised Gentile? The last one we saw was a big giant who had his head cut off by a shepherd boy. I don't want to play on that team. I don't want to be on team's uncircumcised Gentile. I don't want nothing to do with that. I don't want to be, when the odd thing is when who else is circumcised? The Messiah. So when you say be like Messiah, well, what was he like? He was circumcised. Snap. That's all I need to know. Because if I'm not circumcised, then that would be not like him. In what way are you not like Messiah? Well, he's circumcised. There's other things too, but we're focused on this point. In what way are you not like Messiah? Well, let's turn it around. In what way are you like Messiah? Messiah was a Torah observant Jew. He ate kosher, kept the festivals, worshiped on Shabbat, wore tefillin, wore tzitzit. He was circumcised on the 8th day. Right? Ate completely kosher. And what do if you worship on Sunday, don't keep the holidays, don't eat kosher, not circumcised, not Jewish, don't keep Jewish law. So in what way you like him? I'm just asking. I'm asking a question. In what way you like him? So is this making sense to anybody? Is this making sense to anybody? Zakin Yagal says, I wonder if Paul was really a Jew. I wonder that myself. Because nothing he wrote actually makes sense. Even when I said, well, I agree with his first sentence. But then, you know how it is, ladies and gentlemen. I often tell my wife, that the punchline of humor is truth. If you want to be funny, if you want to say witty things and comical things, what makes humor funny is truth. Okay? People laugh at truth. That's why when I make jokes about women and buying shoes, everybody laughs. Why? Because it's true. Okay? And so, also, if you want to pass off a lie, then you have to put a little bit of truth in the lie. A lie will never pass if it's just a blatant lie, completely blatant. Nobody will ever believe it. So Paul adds a little bit of truth to his writings because he's got to make the lie work. That's just classic. And then, by the way, who's the master of lies? Who's the father of lies? The Satan. Okay. And you're right, Levi. How is Christianity like Messiah? It's a rational question. In what way are you like Messiah? So you have Messiah and you have you. In what way are you like him? Is there anything that you do? Is there any way in which you live that is even remotely close to him? The answer, of course, is no. It says, when Abraham was 99 years old, golly, there's so much to talk about, but it says here, with these words, the Zohar begins its reflection on our text. It continues, did Abraham not have visions before he reached 99? Why then does the Torah stress his age? The reason is that now, with this revelation, he begins a new life. So the Zohar is bringing down that circumcision here leads to new life. So in other words, in the Jewish mind, circumcision is directly related to being born anew, beginning a new life. You know, there's a story about a mother who during the Holocaust, it was forbidden to circumcise her children, but she secretly had her son circumcised because she said, on the 8th day, because she said, if my son is going to die, at least he's going to die a Jew. Nancy. No. Nancy Corbin, your statement there is completely false. I would encourage you, Nancy, to take a look on this channel at our playlist on Jesus, Yeshua rather, the Pharisee. Your statement is 100% false in every respect. It says, the covenant with Abraham thus constitutes a higher perfection man before being a Jew, and you will be only accomplish the virtues of Abraham recounted thus far. Be as generous as human, as conciliating, as disinterested, and without a personal agenda. Abraham was up to this point, leads only to the ideal every human being, every Noahide human being should be. First, God led the patriarch successfully through all levels of moral training and had him resolve all that which God demands of every human being. Then he appeared to him a second time and said, I am El Shaddai, walk before me and be perfect. So in other words, circumcision is a elevation to a level of perfection. Okay. Now, Abraham must reach a higher level still than that of the Torah. Its prototype is the commandment of circumcision, which is at the threshold of existence for the Jew. Abraham, this is Rabbi Monk talking, by the way. Abraham had to learn that to be a Jew, serving God through being moral and practicing the moral virtues is not enough. Bam! Just being moral is not enough. That's where you begin, but that's not your destination. And yet we have an entire false religion, Christianity, which is built upon observing only the so-called moral laws. Why did the Satan raise up the false teacher Paul and have him write those heretical letters? Because the Satan knew something you don't know, and that is that he wanted to take you halfway, not all the way, but just halfway. He wanted to keep you from perfection. Perfection, by the way, has nothing to do with your ability to be perfect, but rather God's ability to make you perfect. So it says here, the covenant established with God for the greatest good of all humanity demands more from Abraham and his offspring. It demands absolute free-willed obedience to the law proclaimed by God. For he alone knows the secrets of the universal harmony, the harmony which is the basis for the salvation of the world and of its individuals and peoples. And he alone is able to promulgate those laws capable of restoring this harmony, which has been disturbed from the day of the first sin. The covenant with Abraham is devoted to the realization of this task for all humanity. In other words, in order to be fully in the covenant, we have to obey the laws of the covenant. And if you reject the laws of the covenant, you necessarily reject the law, the covenant of God. Okay. It says, and Abraham undertakes to give unreserved obedience to the divine law. Thus, the first step toward the accomplishment of the universal mission is now taken, which is, of course, is circumcision. This is why the Satan hates circumcision. And he hates Jews and he hates Jewish practice. And he leads people to believe that Jewish practice is not godly. It is. The Pharisees were the good guys. The Pharisees were the godly ones. And Yeshua himself, the Messiah, was in fact a Pharisee. We have proven that conclusively based on historical and biblical record. This is why the Satan hates it so much, and why he raises up people to hate the Pharisees. He raised up an entire religion that was based on hating Jews. Why? Because he knows that circumcision, which is the entry point to the divine law, is the first step towards accomplishing the universal mission that God gave to Israel, which is to bring everybody under the wings of the Shekinah. It goes on to say here, let's see. Let me read this paragraph here. These ideas regarding the commandment of Veye Tamim, right, be perfect, given at the head of the chapter, whose main object is the commandment of circumcision, imply that the underlying reason for circumcision are beyond our comprehension. This is another thing about circumcision. It is a deeply mystical, it's deeply spiritual, and it's frankly beyond our comprehension. Okay? Just like the laws of kosher, which Yeshua absolutely kept the so-called rabbinic laws of kosher 100%. Had he not, how do we know, by the way, that the Messiah, okay, you say that the Pharisees ate a certain way and Messiah did something different. How do we know that's not true? How do we know? Because it wasn't brought up at his trial. That would have been a very easy thing to bring up. And it was not. Period. But the point is that there's deep secrets to kosher eating. There's deep secrets to circumcision. So it says here, indeed, the covenant is called a sod Adonai, a divine secret. The numerous reasons suggested for it are at best approximations. No one saw this more clearly than Onkelos, the proselyte. In answer to the reproaches of his uncle, the Emperor Hadrian, he affirmed that comprehending the Torah is subordinate to the act of circumcision. Ladies and gentlemen, we talk a lot about the fact that if you're not eating kosher, fully kosher, you're never going to fully understand the Torah. And that's true. Here's another secret. If you're not ritually circumcised, you're going to have a hard time understanding the Torah. This is why there are so many people who don't get the Torah. They could be looking at it, reading it in black and white, and still miss it because they're uncircumcised Gentiles. Now, we want all Gentiles to come over to the side of circumcision. It's their choice. But just understand, if you're watching this program and you're not circumcised, you're an uncircumcised Gentile, and you're having a hard time comprehending these concepts, let me just tell you that if and until you go through the process of circumcision and formal conversion, you will never fully get it. This is why, by the way, can I just tell you something? I've told you this before. Never, 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 never learn Torah from uncircumcised Gentiles, from Christian pastors masquerading as messianic leaders. Don't ever do it. Ever. You say, no, I go to this messianic place and my, and my Gentile messianic teacher, he really waxes eloquently about Judaism. You're missing it. Don't do that. Because they cannot comprehend it on a sod level, divine spiritual level, if they're not circumcised. Don't ever do it. And so, that's your warning. You have to be circumcised. This is what Onkelos, a proselyte from the first century, said to his uncle Hadrian. You're not going to be able to understand the Torah if you're not circumcised. You have to have that spirituality. And Zach and Yigal has talked about this. I know Zach and Rayford has talked about this. Many of you have said the same thing. And the Paz the Face videos that have been done, that when you became a Jew, there was you tell me if you agree with this or not. When you became a Jew, there was a marked difference in your understanding of Torah. Is that true? For those of you who have gone through conversion and so forth and so on, there you say there is a marked difference studying as a Jew as opposed to not. You know, there's a level of learning, but when you became a Jew, it changed. Tell me if I'm wrong. What changed? You know, because you went through this, you went through the waters of conversion and men, including circumcision. Ladies are obviously have the advantage spiritually. Ladies are born circumcised, clearly. So it says here, the relationship of cause and effect existing between them can only be of a mystical nature. It's a mystical nature. Nobody can get it. This is why, you know, when you go to Israel as a Jew, it's completely different than going there as a Christian. It's so interesting. Now, one last insight here. Kind of had two parts today because of our little defect on the little issue, what have you. But it says here, comment to verse. There's so many good things here, so many good points. I'm trying to figure out which one. And by the way, I should note, just we probably goes without saying, but medical circumcision does not mean you're circumcised. With respect to what we're talking about here, okay, it doesn't count, if you will. So it says, I will set my covenant. Okay, Jewish destiny is not based on natural events. One cannot consider that the Jews have a pragmatic history in the usual sense of the word. Okay, it says Isaac, the first Jewish son, would never have come into the world according to laws of nature. Jews would long since have disappeared if the natural order had determined their existence as a nation. Jewry's historical existence is founded not on a contract, but on a covenant, a divine covenant, absolute in character, completely independent of all external conditions and contingencies. This is the covenant of Torah. There's only one covenant. There's not another. Okay. The perpetual, unchangeable sign of this covenant is circumcision. Let me read that again. The perpetual, unchangeable sign of this covenant is circumcision. Ladies and gentlemen, circumcision never changes. It never goes away. It is the eternal sign of the covenant. And the letter writer's big shtick was that circumcision has been abolished, as has the entire Torah. The fundamental importance of milah, circumcision, can be seen from the fact that the word brit is repeated 13 times in this chapter. By the way, the number 13 is equal to the word ahava, which means love, and 13 times 2 is the name Yud-Ke Vav-Ke. Rambam tells us that the other mitzvot of the Torah were sealed only by a threefold covenant. The number 13 alludes to the world to come, which is also characterized by this number. Circumcision is the first landmark on the way to the world to come. It's what I just told you. If you're not circumcised, you're not saved. If you're not, which means, by the way, if you're not Jewish, you're not saved. And saved means in the covenant. You say, I disagree. The only way you can disagree with that if you use the words of Paul. But if you look at the Tanakh and the Gospels, you can't disagree with it, what I just said. Who disagrees with me? Paul. He's a heretic. It's very simple. Who disagrees with Paul? God. Circumcision is the first landmark on the way to the world to come. This is why in Jewish writings it says, for those Jews who would become, God forbid, heretics and apostates, that when they die, they're going to go to Gehenna, and Abraham's going to give them their circumcision back, because you can't go to Gehenna with circumcision. Because it's a sign of the covenant, and it's an oxymoron. You can't be outside the covenant and be circumcised. That's why Abraham's going to give them their circumcision back. They've earned it through their sin. Not just sin, but through their rejection of the covenant. Here, the expression "I will set my covenant" is used in contrast to the usual phrase employed by the previously, "I will establish" or conclude. By having the sign of circumcision engraved on the flesh of Abraham and his offspring, he in a way takes back the covenant and then bequeaths it to the patriarch. In other words, he's given Abraham the gift of the everlasting covenant, and the sign of that gift, the sign that you have the gift, is circumcision. End of our Aliyah today. There is so much more on this topic. It is such an important topic. I think that we have only just begun to really talk about it. Thank you so much for being here. If you're new to the program, please be sure and subscribe. There's lots of content on this video. We've talked about Yeshua being a Pharisee, and there is an entire playlist dedicated to that. It is unequivocal. It is beyond dispute. I encourage you to take a listen to it and enjoy it. Go back and listen to last year's discussion about the Lapid. That would be a great one to look at as well. Please be sure and like this video. Remember, our goal is 100 likes on every video, and like the one that we had earlier, because today was a two-part because of a technical issue. So look at the first one and like it, and come back and like this one. Thank you so much for being here. Shabbat Shalom. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we continue our Gospel of Genesis series. Have a great and amazing Shabbat. We'll see you in the morning.